Hey, good evening, fellas. How's it going?
Good
Still going,
evening.
man. Good evening.
Feel good?
So, today is Wednesday. Rivian released their Q1 2025 results yesterday, and there are some pretty good and pretty interesting highlights. Chris, I know that you have some additional insights from actually listening to the call. I wasn't able to make the call itself. I've just been looking through the materials that Rivian has released, but let me go through some of the major kind of bullet points, if you will. So 206 million in gross profit, and it's their second consecutive quarter of positive gross profit, which is a big deal for Rivian. And that's not overall profit, but it is gross profit. And hitting that second consecutive quarter of positive gross margin, all right, yeah, and excuse me, gross margin, not gross profit. So forgive me for all the financial people out there, but gross margin on vehicle sales. But unlocking that milestone is what basically unlocks the $1 billion in investment from Volkswagen, which is apparently due to be delivered, I believe, at the end of June. So Rivian will be adding $1 billion to the bank, which is also a big deal. Another couple interesting things here. So in Q1, Rivian delivered 36,000 demo drives, and Jimmy's shaking his entire desk over there.
Yeah, sorry, I bumped
But
my laptop.
but 7,000 of those were at South by Southwest, which here in my hometown of Austin. And that figure alone kind of blew my mind because 7,000 demo drives. And I guess they're probably counting all the rides that they gave on Mound Rivian, as well as people actually doing demo drives separately just on surface streets. But still, that's a pretty incredible number to happen within the span of a couple of weeks, right? The
They
other
were also
things,
they were also doing it at like all the auto shows, obviously the spaces and stuff, but they pushed hard for Q1 to get a ton of exposure. And I rode in it twice at different auto shows. So and the auto show lines were huge. So I can see why they get to 36,000. It's impressive.
yeah, and as we all know, getting butts in seats is half the battle because once you ride in and or drive one of these things, you may not be able to buy one right away, but you're going to want to buy one because they're amazing. So switching gears a little bit, they also released some news about R2. And they stated that R2 vehicle validation builds are underway on a prototype manufacturing line in Normal using mainly production tooling. And I know that there was someone out of the three of us that said that that wasn't happening when I tried to say, I bet they're doing it now. I feel a little bit validated in that is going on. So a couple more things and then we'll kind of open it up. But I also thought that it was interesting that the majority of the bill of materials for current Rivian vehicles does come from the US. However, the battery cells do not. And so I think that's kind of a little bit putting lipstick on a pig for the time being, because having most everything come from the US is a requirement for tax credit purposes, right? And then the other thing that's down a little bit is their revised delivery outlook for the full year is down to between 40 and 46,000 vehicles, which does not surprise me in the least. And with that, I will take a breath.
I'll talk about some of the stuff they talked about on the call. So I listened to the call. One of the major things was tariff impact. So as Skylar kind of mentioned, like Rivian isn't isolated from the tariff impact. And so they mentioned on the call about $2,000 worth per vehicle of tariff impact. So a $100,000 vehicle, 2% roughly, right? So it's not zero, but it's not a lot. So we could, in reading between the lines, we could see that future vehicles built during the tariff period, and we're going to assume the tariff ends at some point, right? During this tariff period, we could see a cost increase, maybe $2,000. That would be reasonable, but Rivian could say, 3,000 or something. Maybe you didn't listen to the call. You wouldn't be mad if you heard it was 3,000. But yeah, $2,000 of tariff impact from per vehicle. So that was interesting news. The other thing I thought was cool, I'm more of a product person. I don't care too much about the stock. Was they talked about a lot of stuff about R2. As Skylar mentioned, they're doing the design validation builds, which is effectively they have a bunch of different machines now making real vehicle parts. It's not in a computer design anymore. It's physical parts, and they don't know if they fit together, right? And so it's like a Lego set. Building a Lego set for the first time in a prototype fashion, right? Do these things fit together? Can you make this set actually what it's supposed to be? And so that's what they're doing with the design validation builds. They're validating that their designs actually do fit, and so that's what all those are. And there are some pictures of it in the shareholder letter of a handful of design validation builds. One of them has some new rims on it with the Rivian logo on them. I'm not sure if those are just I don't know, temporary wheels or what, but there was some new wheels on R2 in one of the pictures. It was pretty cool. The other thing they mentioned, I think it was during the Q&A, was that R2 is going to get a new camera setup, and as compared to Gen 2 R1, the cameras will be 65 megapixels total. So I believe they use the R1T as the calculation for that. So 10 cameras, 65 megapixels, 6.5 megapixel per camera. Whereas, so then you talk about Gen 2 R1, 10 cameras, divide, same thing, 55. So 5.5 megapixel per camera in Gen 1, Gen 2 R2, Gen 1 R2, I can't even say it. Gen 2 R1.
Yeah.
I got it. Third time. So there's basically a 10 megapixel overall quality improvement coming with R2. And reading between the lines, we can potentially assume that at some point R1 will include the new cameras. In a previous, in the Q4 shareholder letter, they mentioned that R2 also has an updated infotainment and ADAS computer. They call it the XMM3, whereas Gen 2 R1 has XMM2. So at some point, we can assume also that XMM3 in some way, shape, or form will make into R1. We can't have R2 outperforming the flagship vehicle. And so it would make sense potentially in maybe the 2026 model year. Surely by 2027 model year, they have the new cameras and I'm going to call it the R2, the XMM3 board. So if you want to see it, I got the picture up of the board, but it's in a previous slide. So those are the cool things I thought that they brought up in. And then the other thing too is RJ talked about how cool it was to drive the R2, and apparently he's been driving in the past week or so. And then later on, he mentioned he was driving in Arizona, but we didn't see anybody see him driving in Arizona. So I don't know. We need to have the people in Arizona looking closer, and obviously Irvine, California. So.
Well, so Arizona is also where their proving grounds facility is. So he may not have been driving it on public roads.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even because, just hearing Arizona, I would guess that that's at their testing facility.
in one of the previous, maybe it was in the Q4 time too, or maybe it was on Twitter somewhere. He posted or said that they also had done some cold weather testing of R2 at some point. So again, it flew under the radar. Nobody saw that either. So under the secrecy of R2. So that's all I had from the shareholder letter and the call. Anybody, you guys got anything else you found interesting?
So to your rim comment, I think it might have been Jose had messaged or had responded to one of the pictures that RJ posted, and RJ actually replied that those were basically validation wheels that were just part of or wheels that would only be used on the validations. Period.
Okay.
My takeaway, you guys know how much I love talking about service, is they currently state they have 74 service centers. They plan on having over 100 by the end of 2025. Of the 100, currently 43 locations support sales and deliveries, and they expect that to grow to 62 by the end of 2025. I just want to see more numbers than that, and I also want to see Jacksonville / St. Augustine's open.
They take about a year, I believe, from when they start the process to they're open the doors. So
more
by a lot. So thankfully, as of Monday, I haven't even told you guys this, but I finally found permits for St. Augustine. Finally, yeah,
nice.
It's going to be a 48,426 square foot space that they will be leasing, and so I would hope that like 30 something thousand of that's actual shop floor with plenty of room for vehicles and work to be done. Yeah, I'm excited, but that's just
service. Yeah, service ultimately will bring in more sales in terms of like if you have a service center near you, you are more likely to buy, right? Like
100%.
Like right now, you wouldn't buy an R1 or an R2 right now because the service center is so freaking far away from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean if I wasn't as gung ho as I am over this in air quotes stupid truck, yeah, I wouldn't own it right now. Just from a service standpoint. I mean, mobile service has been great. The fact that we have a stand-up service center currently out of our local collision center is great. But yeah, it's not an actual service center. You know what I'm saying? Like from top to bottom. But I mean, I'm excited to see what Rivian's doing, the changes they're making, the fact that they're profitable for the second quarter in a row, is great, and that they've got that $1 billion coming in at the end of June, which is a nice feather in the cap. But yeah, service, man, like we're all crazy about this vehicle to the point that we have them when we don't have service centers. Like your closest one's what, Normal, right, Chris?
Mine's is Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is about 2 hours away.
Yeah. So, but before that one came online, I think your closest was Normal.
It was Cincinnati. Yeah. Okay. Cincinnati's still 2 hours away. Like I can't get. Yeah. It's actually closer to go to Fort Wayne, but I think it's about the same time.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I mean, that's going to be huge.
I was actually at my local service center here in Austin, like 35 minutes away earlier this week, getting the drain plug, HVAC drain plug replaced, which was a recall, and I don't even know much about it. And then also had to get my cup holders replaced. So anyway, yeah, one of the you know how they have the two wings on them that like grab the cup. One of the wings broke off, and in my mind it was a warranty issue. But but they said that it wasn't a warranty thing. But we ended up being able to work it out. So good news there. A couple other things that really jumped out at me about the financials, and this is for, I guess, some of the people that do care about the finances and the stock and whatnot. And I will caveat this in saying that it's always tough to compare the prior quarter when it's a Q4, because there's all kinds of special stuff that can happen at the end of a year with regards to financials, to a Q1. However, this was literally staggering to me. So two things. The overall OPEX went down almost 100 million. So less operating expense, and there could be a lot of reasons for that. However, the really staggering one to me is that the net cash used in operating activities went from negative 1.27 billion down to negative 188 million from Q4 to Q1. So they bled over $1 billion less in Q1 from operating activities than they did in Q4 of 24. And that is a big number. I'd love to understand why. And I typically like to hear the type of questions that the analysts ask at the end, because they dig into things like that. And I'd be willing to bet somebody saw that and somebody asked, why is that so staggering? I'd love to understand why, but that's a big difference. It could be a really good thing for Rivian moving forward, but I don't know. I mean, I need to know more and I need to see more. Really curious to see what the Q2 results end up looking like as well.
I do have one other topic, semi-related. RJ went on CNBC, I think, this morning, or it was one of the networks, financial, and they asked him questions about the earnings, because that's all they talk about for the next few days is earnings. And one of them, he mentioned about having more lease offers, incentives, and stuff to move vehicles, and more variants, more trim levels and stuff like that. So I read between the lines on that we're getting rear-wheel drive finally. And so I thought that was an interesting thing, that he kind of alluded to, new packages and new things to drive vehicle sales. One thing also that came to mind was, remember when Gen 1, they announced the standard pack, and all that ended up being was it was supposed to be LFP, right? And they couldn't source the LFP. So what they ended up doing was software locking the large pack.
Yep.
And they could do the exact same thing again to get around the LFP issue right now, where the LFP is being imported from China. They could do a software locked standard plus and standard pack. And now we know that they can potentially software unlock that as well at some point. So that would be an option too, that's how I read that, is that they could potentially come out with their standard plus standard pack that's based on the large pack, just software limited to whatever range.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense, especially if they can upsell later and kind of recapture some of that lost profit margin. I think, and this is total assumption, but I think at this point, at least with R1, Rivian has advanced enough in manufacturing, I think, to be able to do more and to be able to mix up. I mean, for the first couple of years, they were all about simplifying the manufacturing processes. And I think they're probably mature enough now to where they can do more of that, which will help them meet demand outside of kind of the very narrow silo that they've been in for so long.
I also think they need to do something about pricing. Their cheapest vehicle is $70,000, right? That is their cheapest
Yeah.
vehicle right now. And at a time when there's economic uncertainty and people are balking at that thing, at spending money, let alone $70,000, this would be a perfect time to launch a cheaper vehicle. And so that's why I keep going back to rear-wheel drive. And Cybertruck just came out with the rear-wheel drive, or Tesla came out with the rear-wheel drive Cybertruck. So I think that's what's one of the things he was kind of alluding to.
Yeah. All the things that involve a cheaper vehicle.
Yeah. I mean, they need something to bridge the gap between now and R2. R2 is a year away, right? First half of 2026. And so how do they bridge the gap, and how do they increase their market? They do so by lowering the price. So I'm not saying that the vehicles are going to go on sale. I'm going to say they're going to come out with cheaper variants that will get brand recognition, right? If you see a all-white Rivian driving around that has rear-wheel drive and gets 350 miles of range or something, then you start seeing more and more of them, and eventually you have more sales because it's, again, brand recognition thing.
Yep.
And when you're not in the Midwest, you don't need, or in the northern half of the country, you don't need all-wheel drive. Rear-wheel drive is perfectly fine in the southern half.
Yeah.
I
Except
agree.
for the once in ever so often that it snows in Texas.
Yeah. I mean, all-wheel drive is nice, and I love all-wheel drive for a number of reasons, right? On-road handling, off-road, but yeah, it's definitely not needed. I mean, even as an example, my big truck, my heavy duty truck, is rear wheel drive 99% of the time. And the only time I use four wheel drive is I think I've used it like twice in the snow and or ice. And yeah, when I'm not on a roadway, but literally 99% of the time, and the miles have been in rear wheel drive. So
the vast majority of the Rivian vehicles are probably pavement princesses anyway, right? Like they're just going back
True.
and forth to Costco. That's adventure. Costco on a Sunday is the adventure brand.
Yeah. or all the Rans and outlet malls.
Cool.
All right, guys. Well, hey, I'm curious if any of the audience had some other major takeaways, either from the earnings call or the financials or anything else. If so, then yeah, drop it in the comments or join us on one of the live streams and bring it up. And it is time for us to jump over to the live stream, guys.
It is. See you all over there.
All right. Thanks, everybody.